Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry. I'm a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, we're back with one of our new favorite channels, the Fat Electrician, and he's got a very popular video that I have not checked out yet. It's titled, The Most Gangster Marine of All Time, Dan Daly. I don't know the story, so I'm excited to learn about it and add any historical context with whatever we're talking about here. All right, original video link is down below. Make sure to support him. He's been supporting our channel. Let's make sure we return the favor. All right, let's get started. All right, my man, what you got?
All right, go ahead and make your prediction now. Who would win in a fight? 200 Kung Fu practitioners with melee weapons or one Marine with a machine gun? Today we're talking about the most gangster Marine ever. A man so remarkable that General Lejeune himself would declare him to be the most outstanding Marine of all time. A man that was so fierce on the battlefield that General Smedley D. Butler, one of only 2 Marines to ever receive the Medal of Honor twice, would declare him to be the fightingest Marine he ever knew. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the only other Marine to receive the Medal of Honor twice, Sergeant Major Dan Daly. Born in New York on November 11, 1873, Dan Daly would grow up competing as an amateur boxer as well as working as a paperboy. And while working as a paperboy might seem like the useless details you throw in at the beginning to humanize the main character, in this case, it's anything but, because him working as a paperboy would create a butterfly effect through time that would change the U.S. military as a whole.
I always just think of paperboys in the context of Newsies. Did y'all ever see Newsies back in the day? Maybe he like sang and stuff too, though.
See, you got to remember that this is the late 1800s and information and news didn't spread the same way it does today. So working as a paperboy back then meant that he always got the newspaper, meaning that he had more information at his fingertips than 99% of the population. Because of this, he would be able to closely follow the exploits of future President Theodore Roosevelt and his famous
so return of the century,
the Spanish-American War. And this would go on to be his inspiration.
Late 1800s, early 1900s.
Marine Corps, hoping that he too would be able to fight in the Spanish-American War. So that's exactly what he would do on January 10th, 1899, when Dan Daly would enlist in the United States Marine Corps at the age of 16 years old, coming in at only 5'6" and 135 pounds. But hey, as the old adage goes, it's not about the size of the dog in the fight, it's about the size of the fight in the dog. You see, the real problem here wasn't his stature, but the fact that he joined to fight in the Spanish-American War, and the Spanish-American War ended on December 10th, 1898, exactly 1 month prior to his enlistment date, but the news hadn't spread that far yet, so he ships off to training anyways. So,
let me give you your history. So Spanish-American War started over some territorial stuff with Spain, especially in the Caribbean around Cuba and things like that. Famously started from Spain sinking the Maine, which is a U.S. ship, which probably actually didn't happen that way, but nevertheless led to a war. Ends up being pretty consequential for both sides. The United States wins it, kind of gets de facto control of Cuba, and also the Philippines was big for that. So anyway.
So fast forward, he finishes up training, realizing the Spanish-American War is over. He's kind of like, meh, I mean, the Spanish got off lucky, can't help it. I mean, let's face it, I'm going to get the action I'm looking for at some point, right? This is America. We've been a country for like 124-ish years at this point. We've been not in armed conflict for all of like 45 seconds at this point. Surely something's going to pop up soon. So,
by the way, going back to the newspaper thing, the Spanish-American War has often kind of been called kind of like one of the first wars of mass media, right? In the form of incredibly widespread printed materials. And it also gave us also some of the first instances in American history of a lot of journalism that was very misleading. There was a lot of propaganda stuff that made the Spanish look bad, like executing of Cuban prisoners and stuff like that. They call it like yellow journalism. But yeah, it was one of the first wars where we saw media manipulation to change attitudes for war for propaganda purposes.
So he ends up getting put on ship duty over in the Asiatic fleet on the USS Newark. And sure enough, like after a month of being there, the Boxer Rebellion breaks out. And guess whose ship is the closest one to be able to respond? Dan Daly.
Boxer Rebellion was an anti-foreigner rebellion in China towards the late 1800s that sought to expel foreigners outside of China because the Qing dynasty, people believed, was incapable of basically maintaining their independence at this time because China was being carved up into spheres of influence and exploited by foreign powers. And yeah, it was basically an anti-foreigner rebellion. Was very bloody, especially in cities, but industrial nations all basically came back into China and put that thing down.
All right, real quick, oversimplified explanation of what the Boxer Rebellion is in case you have absolutely no idea. At this point in time, China had really just been opened up to the rest of the world, and foreign influence is just flooding in. You have Western businesses going in there trying to make money. You've got Western governments going
Japan,
in there
Britain,
like, hey, you guys
United
want some
States.
democracy? And then you had missionaries going in there also trying to spread Christianity. And all of this influence came so fast, so quick, that a large portion of the Chinese population felt that it was too much, too soon, and they started to push back and started a nationalist movement. Part of this nationalist movement
got the history
was a bunch
for
of
me.
young men that practiced Kung Fu. Now, to somebody from the West, Kung Fu looks an awful lot like shadow boxing, so they just referred to these young men as boxers, hence the term Boxer Rebellion.
And also it goes back to the group that organized it was called the Righteous and Harmonious Fists. They helped organize the Boxer Rebellion. I always thought that was the coolest name, the Righteous and Harmonious Fists. And I always just told my students, like, the foreigners are like, hey, that's way too long of a name. I heard fists in there. All right, you're the boxers.
These boxers got together, started their own little club called the Society of the Righteous and Harmonious Fist, and then proceeded to run around beating the shit out of and or killing every foreign diplomat, businessman, and missionary they could find.
And Chinese
Christians. And it is at that point that the Marines get sent in. So Private Daly and the rest of the Marines show up to Peking,
Big
China,
execution
which would later
movement.
go on to become known as Beijing, the capital of China, at which point they promptly and immediately take over a large legation center on the southern border wall of the city, known as the Tartar Wall. They then gather up all the refugees they can find, get them inside the legation center, and set up a defensive perimeter. Things are going well. Now we're just waiting for reinforcements. Problem, hours and hours go by, the reinforcements don't show up, and it's about to be dark out. So at this point, the Marine leadership's thinking like, hey, the reinforcements are definitely on the way. They wouldn't just leave us here, which means the reinforcements have gotten lost because, I mean, let's face it, if there was ever a time or a place where the directions of go to the giant building on the big fucking wall wasn't specific enough, it would be in China, right? I mean, they're known for their big ass walls. It's kind of their thing. So they're lost out there. We need to go find them before
Build the wall,
nighttime.
make the
Otherwise,
Mongols
they're gonna
build
get
or
ambushed
pay
by
for
like
it.
1,000 of these Kung Fu guys, and they're all gonna get killed. So we're all gonna leave, go find the reinforcements, and come back. Private Daly, you're gonna stand guard here by yourself. Now, I don't know what the logic was behind this. I don't know if it was like, fuck Private Daly, he's the new guy, he can have the shitty job, or if it was like, hey, Private Daly's a new guy, this mission's really dangerous, let's leave him here where it's safe, or maybe they knew he was the main character and that he had plot armor. I have no idea. Either way, Private Daly is now effectively playing goalie for America for all of these refugees. So
By the way, very few people know that the United States was actually involved in China like this militarily, likely because it was such a large coalition that you don't see the amount of troops that you're going to see fighting like the Spanish-American War, for example, just around the same time. And of course, World War1, you know, that's going to be coming up. So I think that United States involvement there is actually something that has very much gone under the table there. I mean, again, did you know about it?
So sure enough, like an hour after all the other Marines leave, hundreds of Boxer rebels show up and they're looking for a fight. Now, a couple of them have guns like muskets and stuff, really
It's old
outdated
tech.
weaponry. By and large, they're all carrying traditional Chinese martial arts weapons like swords, bow staffs, what have you. Some of them are even just rocking the old meat mittens, but they're looking for a fight either way. And this is shaping up to be one of the most ridiculous battles of all time. I mean, this is the type of stuff you get drunk at the bar and ask your buddy, like, hey, you think you could take on all 300 Spartans if you had a machine gun? Like, that's exactly what's about to go on here. I mean, in one corner, you've got an 18-year-old Marine with a machine gun, and in the other corner, you have 200 martial artists with like bow staffs and shit. You literally.
By the way, the outcome of this is no different than a lot of the conflicts that had gone up to this. Go back to the Opium Wars in the earlier 1800s, where basically the British, with far fewer numbers, with their naval power, was able to overwhelm the Chinese port cities and thus keep their trade of opium going, which was like a fifth of all the money that Britain makes came from selling drugs. But we're able to overcome that. And this time of China, 1800s, was tumultuous, because then after that, in between these two events that we're talking about, you also have the Taiping Rebellion, which is probably the bloodiest rebellion in world history, with a good probably 20 million people that die over 10 years. 1800s was rough for China, very, very rough for China. It's going to set the stage for, you know, their own communist revolution and take over and unseating of the Qing dynasty and their rapid transformation that they go under in the 20th century. Stuff like that doesn't happen out of nowhere.
Literally have gun fu versus kung fu. Okay?
Gun
and
fu.
here's the kicker with the entire thing. The Society of the Righteous and Harmonious Fist legitimately and wholeheartedly believes that their martial arts training has made them impervious to bullets. Yeah.
Indiana.
So this entire horde of Kung Fu fighters just starts running at Daly as fast as they can as he opens fire with his machine gun, and they fight well into the night. The rest of the Marines were a couple miles away. They found the reinforcements, but now it's too dark for them to travel in this rioting city at night safely, so they've adopted a little defensive position, and they're just holding position until daylight. They're literally forced to just sit there and listen to the machine gun fire and the yelling and the screaming and machine gun fire, and then suddenly the machine gun runs out of ammo, and then there's bolt action rifle fire, fire. He gets the machine gun reloaded. There's more machine gun fire, and this goes on for hours, and then it progressively just gets slower, and there's less machine gun fire and less screaming and less machine gun fire and less screaming, and then suddenly it just stops. At this point, the Marines have to accept the fact that their friend has just died courageously in battle, fighting an entire mob by himself because they left him alone. And all the civilians that they've been tasked with protecting are going to be slaughtered. And now all they can do is sit there and wait for the sun to come up. So the sun comes up and the Marines start making their way back to the legation center, but they're kind of dragging their feet because, well, they know what they're going to find. They're really just there to recover the remains of Private Daly and make sure that those are taken care of. And they start making their way there. And as they get closer, they're like, man, Private Daly really took out a lot of these guys. That's impressive. And they get closer and like, holy shit, he took out a ton of these guys. This is the most aerodynamic mass grave I've ever seen. And they get to the top of the wall, and there's Private Daly smoking his pipe, leaning up against his machine gun.
My
and they're like, holy shit, you made it. He's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Well, we heard the machine.
He's got his pipe. He's like Gandalf after the battle to get Saruman there. You know, that building he was holding down looked very fortified. I mean, it had the walls, a big stone building. That looked like a pretty, again, fortified, defendable place there. But still with these numbers, this is crazy impressive, I guess.
Machine gun stopped firing and we just assumed that you'd been killed. He's like, no. I only quit firing because they quit coming. Dan Daly has effectively pulled off the impossible. He has single-handedly defeated 200 rebels by himself, saving all of the civilians as well as saving the day. All the Marines are like, holy shit, we're going to nominate this guy for the Medal of Honor because this is incredible. Dang. All the businessmen and the delegates are like,
he said he got
oh
two
my God,
medals, right,
we've
eventually
seen what one Marine can do, and now we've got 1,200 Marines. We're definitely going to make it out of this alive. Hooray. And all the missionaries are like, oh my God, this is not what we meant when we said we wanted to make these people more holy. Shortly after this, Dan Daly would be awarded his first Medal of Honor for the battle, and then he would go on to continue serving in the Marine Corps as if nothing had happened. Okay, fast forward 15 years, now Gunnery Sergeant Daly has been involved in every military conflict the U.S. has for the past 2 decades. He is one of the most experienced combat veterans in the entire U.S. military, and he is a living legend in the Marine Corps. And on October 24th of 1915, Gunnery Sergeant Daly would find himself leading a platoon of men through Haiti during the Cacos Rebellion. Just after his entire company would cross a river, his entire company would be attacked on all 3 sides by over 400.
World War I, we're still a couple years away from U.S. involvement as until 1917. So
Cacos rebels, forcing them to retreat back into the river. And while doing so, the horse carrying the crew-served machine gun would be shot and sink to the bottom of the river as the remaining Marines continued to cross the river before adopting a defensive position to repel the attack until nightfall. It is now pitch black outside, and Gunnery Sergeant Daly knows as soon as the sun comes up, they are going to get attacked again, and the only chance they have is to get that machine gun back from the bottom of the river. So he takes off by himself in the dark of night, goes all the way back to the river, and just begins diving to the bottom of the river, trying to find this dead horse with the machine gun strapped to it. And after hours of trying, he finally finds this horse, manages to go down, untie the machine gun, come back up for air, go back down again, getting pieces, ammunition, the gun itself, the tripod. He gathers up all of this stuff, gets it out of the river, and then straps it to his back and carries it back to his men. Bear in mind, that is over 200 pounds of equipment, and this guy is 5'6", 135 pounds, but he gets it done anyways. Now,
by the way, having totally submerged machine guns, military people, help me out here. What should that do to the gun itself and its effectiveness, and any ammunition that was fully submerged? What should be the effect of that?
Now, Marines believe in a couple things when it comes to a gunfight. Number 1, bring a gun. Number 2, bring friends with guns. Number 3, decide to be aggressive enough, quickly enough. If you're not picking up what I put down, I'm trying to tell you that he is not about to use this machine gun for self-defense. He's about to use this machine gun for self-offense. First thing in the morning, he gets his men together. They launch an attack first, scattering the enemy into the jungle, retreating, and Daly has effectively saved himself and all of his men, earning himself his 2nd Medal of Honor.
This was such an important time in military history when you talk about the inequality of machine guns, or just specifically machine guns, but between those that have these advanced technologies as a result of the industrial revolution and those that are still holding on to pre-industrial technologies. You saw it with China. China did not have the military advancement that imperial industrial nations did, like Western states. And it's a big reason why through this time period between about the mid 1800s through up to World War I, why this is the age of imperialism, where virtually every part of the world was colonized by an industrial Western power, right? Almost the entirety of Africa, most of Asia. And then even the big, Asian states. This is at this time the British rule India. China's been carved up into spheres of influence. Japan's the only one holding on to their autonomy at this time. But yeah, it's the haves and the have-nots of military technology are the ones that run the show in the turn of the century.
Fast forward 2 years, June 1st, 1917. It's World War I, and Daly is now a first sergeant, leading an entire platoon of young, inexperienced Marines into the Battle of Belleau Wood.
I believe there was only about 200,000 standing army at this time in the United States. It was very small. Our army sizes have exploded since, especially World War I. Then even going into World War II is very small. But after, we've had now the largest standing army in the world. But back then it was very, very small. United States was trying to be a more isolationist nation, especially when it comes to overseas affairs. Now, that's not to state that because you have Monroe Doctrine, where the United States is going to be involved in the Western Hemisphere, but that was largely it. And guys like this would have been the first people that would have been sent out once the declaration of war happened in 17 to go out and have to get right in the lines, while the United States has to draft and train 1 to 2 million soldiers. These are the guys that had to hold down the fort during that training period.
Don't know the Battle of Belleau Wood. The Germans are just rampaging through France, making a
brutal
beeline right
war
towards Paris.
Battle.
And at Belleau Wood, the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, the French
it's their
Army,
first
and the British
engagement,
Army all
right?
get together to stop the German military in their tracks. Now, this
one of the
made it
first
not only a
U.S.
strategic
engagements
battlefield, but a symbolic battlefield, because how dare you stop the mighty German military? Now they're going to hit back twice as hard just to prove that it was a fluke. Because of this, right after they stopped the German military on June 1st, the French military is like, okay, we stopped them. Let's take the W and head back to Paris, and we'll fight from there. We don't want to get slaughtered in this wood line by the Germans because they're pissed. And it is at this point that the Marine leadership famously responded by saying, and I quote, "Retreat. Hell, we just got here." And then
yeah, it's the famous one. Understand, the French have been hanging on for dear life for 3-4 years now. Like, they've been lucky. They've been just a few dozen miles outside of Paris itself, and fighting to the death for basically no gains. That's really how World War I was, right? Until the last year.
Marine Corps pretty much dons their gas masks, fixes bayonets, and proceeds to fight their ass off for the next 26 days straight. Okay, here's what I need you to understand. On paper, the Marine Corps should absolutely not win this fight. They are both outnumbered and outclassed. The German military is one of the most veteran fighting militaries on the planet.
It's wearing thin now, though.
And the Marine Corps is primarily comprised of a bunch of 18-year-old kids that have never seen combat. However, leading those 18-year-old kids is a bunch of fucking badasses like Dan Daly. Okay, this video started with him being a paperboy from New York. He is now a 45-year-old man with 2 medals of honor that has been in the Marine Corps since he was 16 years old. This man is a grizzled veteran that has been there, done that, and has a t-shirt, and he is about to don his plot armor and fuck shit up. So the Battle of Belleau Wood kicks off on June 1st. Pretty much immediately, First Sergeant Daly's lieutenant gets shot, and he is now out of the fight. Okay, if you don't know what that means, the officer is the one guy on the battlefield that sorta kinda pretends like he gives a fuck, and he is now gone. The regulator is off the war machine, and First Sergeant Dan Daly is now in charge of his entire company,
time for him to step
unopposed. Fast forward, June 5th, German artillery strikes.
He's gonna go ham, isn't he?
Depot, lighting everything on fire. Dan Daly leads his entire platoon in, sets the fire out, prevents all the ammunition from exploding, saves the entire battle. Fast forward 5 days, June 10th, the German machine gun squad would try to advance on Daly's company. Daly would get up by himself with nothing but 3 frag grenades and his Colt 1911, using the 3 grenades to disable the machine gun before approaching, shooting their commanding officer, killing him, and taking the other 14 Germans as prisoners of war. Fast forward a couple of hours, still June 10th, Dan Daly looks around at the faces of the young men that he's leading through this battle, and they're looking tired. They're looking like this is the worst time of their life, and it is at this point that Dan Daly decides that he needs to get aggressive enough quickly enough.
How have I not heard of this guy? Because this sounds just as crazy and like as the Alvin York story in World War I. Sabaton, are you going to write a song about this guy?
This battle's effectively been a stalemate for the last 10 days, and he's had enough of this bullshit. So he gets up, walks right out into the open in this wheat field that's functioning as no man's land between the Marines and the Germans. He looks at the Germans' line, turns around, looks at his Marines, and yells, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?"
That's
before
him?
charging at the German line.
Okay, I've heard of that line. You want to live forever, right? It's like, do you really want to live forever? Almost like cynical about it. Like, no, you don't. Let's go. This guy has already made his peace a long time ago. I think when you go through as much as him, you understand death and you understand the possibility of it, and you've already accepted it. You know what I mean? I've heard that line before. Do you want to live forever? Speaking of, Sabaton puts that in a, is it in the, which song is that? The Devil Dogs? Is that what Devil Dogs is about? Is that about Dan Daly? I know it's about the Marines and stuff, and at Bella Wood. I guess, yeah, you're right. They did make a song about it. They just didn't talk about him specifically, but that whole Marine unit.
All of his Marines, that's Dan fucking Daly, we're going to follow him, so they charge too. In an act of pure hyper-aggression, Dan Daly's company would catch the Germans off guard and would actually manage to punch through their line, causing all the other Marines to become hyper-aggressive and attack as well, effectively setting off a chain reaction that would lead to the Marine Corps pushing the Germans all the way out of Bella Wood over the course of the next 16 days, where on June 26, American High Command would receive a single telegram, and I quote, "Woods, now Marine Corps entirely," giving America its first win in World War I and the Marine Corps its new moniker. Due to the blatant hyper-aggression of the Marines, the Germans began calling them the Teufelhunden, or the Devil Dogs.
Okay, it is. Okay, it is. All right. I totally forgot about that song until now, and now it makes total sense. Oh, so Sabaton got on it. Y'all were you're way ahead of me on that one. I should never have doubted you that you would have missed a story like this.
Actions of First Sergeant Dan Daly. After the Battle of Bella Wood, Daly would continue to serve throughout World War I until on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the Germans would surrender, effectively ending World War I, which is why in America we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th, which is also,
just
by sheer coincidence,
2 days ago.
I'm sure, Dan Daly's birthday.
3 days ago when
the guy's the main character. I don't know what to tell you. So then, because Dan Daly was like the badass at the Battle of Bella Wood, he gets put up for yet another Medal of Honor, potentially becoming the first man in American history to pull off the Medal of Honor hat trick, getting the three-peat. Absolutely everybody that was there that day all signs off on it. His men, his chain of command, they do the paperwork, they send it off to DC to get this man his medal. Then the political side is like, no, absolutely not. We don't care if he earned it or not. It's not about getting what you deserve. It's about doing what we think is fair, and we don't think it's fair that he should get 3 medals of honor, so we're just not going to give it to him because we said so. Go fuck yourself. So
dude, that's what they did to Nikola Jokic. He should have got his 3rd MVP, right? And they're like, medal, MVP exhaustion. This guy is the American version of Nikola Jokic.
Instead, they go ahead and they give him the Distinguished Service Cross and the Navy Cross, which, if you don't know, both of those are like tied for the 2nd highest military honor, because apparently 2nd plus 2nd equals 1st. I guess.
No.
Anyways, so he gets those instead. And then, bear in mind, this is 1919, right after World War I. Like a month later in 1919, the military creates a new law that you're only allowed to earn 1 Medal of Honor. Okay, Dan Daly is so fucking gangster, they literally had to change the rules on how many times you're allowed to achieve the highest honor in the military. After World War I, he would retire as a sergeant major,
changed the game.
turned down becoming a commissioned officer on multiple occasions, citing that he would rather be an outstanding sergeant than just another officer. He would then go on to work as a bank security guard, where for 17 years he would be the living embodiment of the world's shittiest lottery ticket for anybody dumb enough to try to rob that bank.
Yeah, no
Could
kidding.
you imagine just being some bank robber trying to get some quick cash and you run into the most gangster Marine of all time? Okay, I'm just gonna throw it out there. He didn't retire from being a bank security guard until 1936, and John Dillinger's bank robbing spree was from 1933 to 1934. So for a couple of years there was a significantly greater than 0% chance that the world almost got the ultimate clash of the bank robbing
that would have been cool,
and the most gangster Marine to ever live. And I'm gonna go ahead and write that down in my book as the coolest thing to never actually happen.
Maybe Dillinger knew about him though and was like, no way, we're not going after that. We're gonna avoid that. We'll get the weak banks. We're not going to Daly's bank.
In conclusion, Mark Twain is frequently accredited with the famous quote, "It's not about the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog."
Samuel
when in
Clemens,
reality,
baby.
it wasn't Mark Twain mine that said that first. It was actually Dwight D. Eisenhower, 5-star Army general and the 34th president of the United States. Somebody that would have known good and well who Sergeant Major Dan Daly was. And I think that maybe, just maybe, he had that 5'6", 135-pound devil dog on his mind when he came up with that.
Fair enough.
Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out. I cannot believe that my favorite character from Starship Troopers is actually based off Dan Daly, and I had no idea.
Come on, you ape! You want to live forever? I expect the best.
Final thoughts. Don't go anywhere. All right, a fantastic story with fantastic storytelling. I can't expect any less anymore from our friend, the Fat Electrician. All right, what a story. Okay, Dan Daly there. Man, just like, do these guys ever just make you feel like a wuss and lazy? These guys that go through all of this stuff, and comparatively to how easy our lives are these days. It always makes me feel like that you need to accomplish more, right? So anyway, okay, again, great job here from Fat Electrician. Like he said, you can support his channel. At the very least, go give that a view, like, subscribe to his channel. He's got some cool merch like that you can check out. A bunch of other different designs in his store. So, all right, as the video is closing here, if you want to see some of the other commentary videos I've done on his stuff, you'll see that pop up around here. And if you want to recommend any, of course, let me know. Come over to the Discord server, drop it in the video suggestions, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.